Alright students, here we go. This is Morales with chapter 36.3, Latin America and Neocolonialism. It's a longer name, but that's the basics. So in this one we're going to take a look at the post-World War One post-World War One, in particular in Latin America, and the changes that happened. Also tied to the Great Depression, and then in particular U.S. involvement in Latin America, and then the beginnings of what's called the nationalistic movements in Latin America that are different from the independence movements from before independence, whereas they threw off Europe, and then nationalism, whereas they made new countries from these areas to represent the people. So it starts with the development, Latin American development, Part of it is a reaction against U.S. influence that shows up in protests of university students, and this is where universities get the stereotype or the image, okay, because rightfully so many times, of being the liberal colleges for liberals. So during this time period in the 1930s and such, you have the spread of alternative political ideologies, mainly tied to the fact of the Great Depression. Had capitalism been working fine and everything, that these things wouldn't have happened. There would have been this appeal so much. But because things are down, they look for other ways to do things. And so the rise of Marxism, the rise of communism and socialistic states, all these are reinforced during this time period because kids are looking for, and younger people are looking for, a better way to do things, better than before. So Fidel Castro shows up in this part. I really don't know, because he really has more importance later, but it's just kind of the groundings of where he gets his philosophy. And then Jose Carlos Mariátegui, he's in Peru. He's one of the communist sympathizers or communist adherents for South America. And then Diego Rivera, which we'll spend some time with because he's one of my favorites. So here's a picture of Rivera. Picture Rivera did. This one, you just take a look at these scenes here. So right in the middle you see this guy that looks like Emiliano Zapata. I hope you guys caught that. And then off to the side of each one are the forces he fought against. So if you look to the left, his right, you'll see these are the Europeans grabbing for power and such, and wealth, and trying to take over what was Mexico, so European control. On the right side is the Mexican military trying to take control. Notice they're about to stab him, and the guys in the background are the wearing the suits and the kind of the Monopoly man guy. And you notice all the money torn around, and then Zapata right in the middle with the gun, standing tall. Okay, and then to the right is the murder of the university students that your book didn't mention, but there was attacks on the university because that's a hotbed of liberal ideas in the protest movement, and so it shows the skull or the death symbol graduating, emphasizing the university movement for change. So that's one of his pictures. We were not going to spend a lot of time on that one. Here's another one that shows the colonial power. We'll probably do this a little bit more in class, but this is one of my favorite paintings. These are both parts of a scenes from a larger murals that Diego Rivera did. So they're fully politically inclined with a huge message about what's going on. So back to the Latin American control. They set up this new type of domination. This new domination is the neocolonialism. Neo for new. Colonialism in the past where the Europeans or another group would come in and control the area. Well, this is a different type of control. It's still colonialism or still imperialism, but this is through economic controls. So the Great War ensures U.S. domination because Europe goes down. Americas are so close. America moves quickly into kind of take the power vacuum that existed. Partially because they can, but partially because they need to, because they still need the raw products to fuel their industry. The U.S. did not invade Mexico, so second line just says, no way, come on, man, this just checking to see if my students in class are paying attention. Okay. The huge capital investment in Latin America by the United States, and all to emphasize the export of raw materials, products that America industry needs. Everything from tin and copper and other items and oil, of course, into the U.S. to be manufactured into something else. This sets up the beginning of what's referred to as the dollar diplomacy, also referred to as Yankee imperialism. And dollar diplomacy is what Taft calls it, where the U.S. is going to spend money to develop these places, but mainly for only their U.S. purposes. So very similar to what was going on in Africa with the Europeans. They're developing these areas, but not really to benefit the people, more to benefit the businesses in there. And the negative aspect is often referred to as Yankee imperialism. So this is where America starts to earn its reputation of not being a true supporter of movements or the people in Latin America, but mainly to get benefit for themselves. And the establishment of banana republics. So every time I show this, kids think I'm full of it because they only think of the stores. So banana republics actually comes from the concept of America and Central America, United States and Central America, and companies like United Fruit Company and Dole Company investing tons of money and essentially controlling large parts of countries down there for fruit production or agriculture production, mainly fruits. So bananas are the big thing. Okay, pineapples and all sorts of other fruits like that. They controlled them, and they basically ran the country because they brought so much money. They got to pick or help coordinate who became president. And so this is part of the Yankee imperialism. Oftentimes, the person who was going to be the leader was in it more for themselves and benefited from the American money more so than helping out the people in the area. So the impact of the Great Depression is kind of mixed in this area because, for the most part, these areas became dependent upon exporting things to industrial powers, the West, Europe, and the United States. And when they go down the tube in the Great Depression, so do Latin American countries because they have no one to purchase their stuff. During that time, they've also converted most of their subsistence farming into cash crop farming, so they have no one to sell their cash crop to, so they're going to be really hurt. So because they became export dependent, the Great Depression hurts them quite a bit. On the other hand, the Great Depression also spurs a lot of domestic industry and economic experimentation in the sense that, well, they're not going to be able to get it from someplace else, so they're going to have to acquire these things on their own. And economic experimentation is the idea that they're going to try different ways to deal with the Great Depression, which everyone was doing. That's what the New Deal was all about. Let's try to figure out a way to deal with it, because the old system of just let capitalism run and then it'll fix itself wasn't working. So this new experimentation in domestic industry is exemplified by Dornelis Vargas, okay, and I'm not sure if I'm saying it right because it's Portuguese and not Spanish, but we'll say it with the Spanish accent. He pushes big time for Brazil to improve their industry, and over the appeals of the landowners, because he's got the backing of the military, and he's telling them that, look, we need to make Brazil strong and powerful. If not, we're going to be taken over and succumb to European and American influence as opposed to running our own show. So he starts to set up protectionist plans, which essentially means tariffs and the buildup of infrastructure within Brazil. And they do develop a steel industry along with certain other things like workers' protections and social programs. So similar to what was going on with the American and New Deal, in that they started to develop some new industries and techniques, the workers' protection and social programs, to deal with the Great Depression. So here's a map of all the Americans' involvement in Latin America. And take a careful look at all the places they intervene. And I want you to take a look at like Nicaragua and Cuba. Look at the times that they've been involved. And all these are stemming from the idea of the Monroe Doctrine along with the Roosevelt Corollary, which Monroe Doctrine said that U.S. will protect these areas, and then the Corollary, which stated that America gets to be involved whenever their interests are at hand or an issue. And so they did. So that switches with FDR, partly because of the New Deal and partly because the upcoming events that are going to happen. FDR establishes what's called the good neighbor policy, and at this time he's going to try to be more friendly towards these Latin American nations for a couple of reasons. One, they're growing. Two, America knows that they need them to stay connected to produce for the raw products for their businesses. And then the other thing is that they already, FDR, after coming in office, he senses that a war is going to happen, breaking out in Europe. So he ends the intervention mentality. Number one, it's the Great Depression. They can't afford it. They can't afford to keep on sending troops down there to quell things or to control things. So he wants to be their friend to help them set up things. So they're going to avoid direct intervention by supporting local leaders. We'll give them money, we'll give some assistance, we'll give some training to a local leader and have him run the show and hope that that person will stay friendly with us. And also he sets up a situation for more U.S. involvement in businesses to pour more money into these areas in a sense to build up their infrastructure so that the U.S. benefits and so the place kind of turns around. So this is a good neighbor policy in the sense that America's kind of being good, but at the same time it's very clear that it's for their own self-interest, which that's typical for a big power. So here's a random picture of FDR with Chiang Kai-shek for some reason, and Churchill in the background. Don't know who the woman is. Okay. And then in Nicaragua, here's an example of what was going on. So this is how the good neighbor policy breaks out. Nicaragua fell into a civil war in the 1920s. There's this guy named Somoza, who the Americans support. He's actually a general for the elected president that America helped support, and then that guy was ineffective, so Somoza takes over and becomes a military dictator of the area. Well, this goes against this guy named Augusto Cesar Sandino, who leads the opposition, and he's opposed to big-time U.S. involvement, number one, but also opposed to Somoza. Somoza eventually assassinates Sandino in 1934, and Sandino becomes a martyr for the cause of nationalism, and not just in Nicaragua and other places. And so he exemplifies the idea that Nicaragua should be for Nicaraguans, Guatemala for Guatemalans, and those things. And it shows that the Americans are kind of helping out an elite group of people as opposed to the general population. So, although America maintains good relations, Somoza maintains good relations with the U.S., he wants to because America's giving him support. They're giving him weapons, equipment, training, and supplies, all for staying good friends with America. Another example would be FDR and what happens in Mexico. Alright, so with the Mexican developments, okay, what's going on? So remember, FDR is trying to do the good neighbor policy, and FDR had renounced the intervention of Monroe Doctrine, so the idea that America could get involved whenever. With that, they had a conference not too long ago of the American nations, so the 7th Conference of the American Nations, in which they said that each place has its independence and its own rights and self-governments, and that no other places could get involved. And along with that, and at that time, Lázaro Cárdenas, the president, Lázaro Cárdenas, the Mexican president, takes advantage of the situation, and he nationalizes the Mexican oil industry. So these are oil industries that's running in Mexico, but they're operated by U.S. and British companies for the most part. I think there's a French company in there as well. He essentially nationalizes them, which means he takes them over. He says, here, British Petroleum and Shell Oil and Chevron, I think, was in there, and they says, we're taking it over. This is a Mexican property. We're now running the business. We'll pay you for it. The American companies and British companies protest to their governments, and they really want the American government to get involved and to force Mexico to give them back their areas. The Roosevelt at that time, because he's doing the good neighbor policy, says no way, and he essentially has the Mexicans pay the British companies or the oil companies $24 million in compensation, even though they said it was worth $260 million. So the difference is the fact that the oil companies, not the British, the oil companies had been reporting the value of the place as $24 million. So Mexico says, we'll pay you what you've been paying taxes on. You say it's worth $24 million, we'll pay you. And that's when they change their tune and say, oh no, it's worth $260. Well, it's too late now. The U.S. does this because they want to retain the support of Mexico, because they fear they're approaching war, and also they're dependent upon Mexico for the immigrant labor. We need laborers to come to America to come do our work, so we don't want to get them too upset and cause issues. Okay. All right, hey, we finished one.